Says they forgot, but who really forgets and doesn't try to prove it all the time, speaks with firmness, head up, rehearsed posture, but the body gives it away. The silence reveals it. It's not freedom, it's defense. It's not detachment, it's fear. They try hard to seem whole, but what is whole doesn't need to show itself all the time, and those who have moved on don't look back so much. The memory still asserts itself. The presence that tries to be denied reappears in the smallest things, in a smell, a time of day, a common phrase said by another voice. And then comes that pause, quick, almost imperceptible, but once noticed, always noticed. It's not admitted longing, it's disguised longing, because admitting what one feels, I would mean dismantling everything that's been said so far. The name still weighs, the memory still throbs, and inside, the absence continues to take up too much space. It's easier to deny than to deal with it. It's easier to seem cold than to face what never really cooled down. Some looks are avoided, some songs get changed. There are places that are no longer visited, not by chance but out of fear of feeling everything again. The truth doesn't need to be spoken out loud to exist. It just continues. Even when everyone pretends it's over, those who forget simply live, without the rush to prove it, without the act of overcoming it. Speaks with firmness, speaks as if they have already overcome it. But words, when they come with too much force, usually carry exactly the opposite of what they say. Those who have erased don't need to announce all the time that they are clean. The body gives it away, always gives it away. A stiffness in the shoulder, a micro gesture with the hand. A silence in the middle of a phrase that seemed harmless. It's subtle, but visible. To those who have experienced presence, absence always leaves signs. And deep down the discomfort grows, not because there's still something unresolved, but because there's something that never stopped being felt. What is truly felt doesn't die with time. It only changes clothes. Sometimes it disguises itself as indifference, other times as hurry, as life goes on. But goes on to where, if everything inside still revolves around the same memory? It is not freedom. It is escape. It is defense. It is the instinct trying to protect what the consciousness still does not have the courage to face. That no matter how resolved everything seems, there is still a name that bothers in silence. And it is at this point that one realizes, without needing a revelation, without drama, just that sensation embedded in the chest that nothing has truly gone away. Realizing hurts, because once realized, you can no longer pretend. The truth becomes presence, and the presence, when it returns, demands stance. It demands clarity. And no one is prepared to look into their own eyes and admit, I said I forgot, but I lied. Time passes. Conversations change. Other names appear, other faces, perhaps. But there is something that insists. It insists even when life seems to have moved on, even when the paths already intersect with other routes, even when everything around already calls for a new version. But how to wear the new, when inside you still carry the old? It is strange, uncomfortably strange, because the absence does not come as lack. It comes as a presence that does not fit. It comes as a memory that refuses to become just a memory. It comes as a voice that echoes inside, even if everything outside seems silent. And the worst part, it is not romantic longing. It is not the desire to go back. It is just the raw realization that forgetting was a label, never a reality. Who forgets does not close their eyes with the name still at the nape. Who forgets does not feel tightness when seeing something that reminds of the past. Who forgets does not flee. And this is the most noticeable part of all, the escape. The desperate attempt not to feel what has already been felt, to run from what has already reached inside, to pretend to have overcome when, in fact, you only distanced out of fear of your own reflection. Because when it hurts to remember, it is a sign that it still matters. And when it still matters, everything else is just a distraction. And then the disguises emerge, the excess of rationality, the forced humor, the ready-made answers, the rush to show the world that everything is resolved. But the world doesn't need to see anything. The world doesn't know what happens at 3 a.m. when everything falls silent. The world doesn't see the eyes that look away. The world doesn't feel the heart racing when hearing a name that should be irrelevant. No, the world doesn't see, but the truth does, and it imposes itself. Over time, the body begins to carry what the mind has long been tired of trying to hide: insomnia, anxiety, tension, irritability, lack of presence in the present. Because when the past still throbs, the present never fits. And why all this if it was supposed to be over? Because it wasn't over. It never ended. It was just set aside, locked away, repressed, hidden behind phrases that try to conclude what was never finished. There was no end. There was an interruption, and that changes everything. When something truly ends, it leaves no shadow. But when something is interrupted, it becomes a ghost. And ghosts have the terrible habit of appearing at the most inopportune moments: a song, a perfume, a street, a phrase spoken by another mouth, a meaningless dream, a random thought. And there it is again, what was supposed to be forgotten. And what do you do with that? Most people ignore it. But ignoring what you feel doesn't make it disappear. It just accumulates. It just shifts. Absence is not measured by the time without speaking. It is measured by the intensity of what is still felt even after so much silence. And sometimes, just a wrong comma in any conversation and it all comes back. It's enough to see that the other person moved on. It's enough to realize that maybe it's too late to go back. It's enough to understand that now what bothers isn't the loss anymore. It's the regret. Because in the end, what hurts isn't the end. It's pretending that the end was a choice, when in fact it was cowardice. And where does this nameless pain go? It stays hidden, like dust under the rug, like a knot in the stomach that nobody understands, like misplaced anger in innocent conversations, like exhaustion without a reason. But it's there every day, silent but alive, tense but present. And one day it leaks, in the form of a crisis, in the form of an unexpected tear, in the form of silence where there was once presence. You can't erase what was true. You can't cut ties made with the soul. You can pretend for a while. You can even fool half the world. But the truth always finds a way to reappear. That's what few have the courage to say, that forgetting someone is not a matter of time, it's a matter of truth. And if the truth is that you still feel, then no time will resolve it. As long as there is a reaction, there is feeling. As long as there is discomfort, there is connection. As long as there is a living memory, the end has not truly ended. It's just a pause, and pauses sooner or later ask for continuity, or a real closure, but never indifference. Never this poorly rehearsed act of wanting to seem strong. It's in this that almost nobody speaks. In the after, in the part that can't be shared, in the feeling of being in another place with another person, living another story, but with an absent soul, as if everything was done with the body, except with the heart. That's when you realize that it wasn't about time, that it wasn't about finding someone better, that it wasn't about changing the scenery. It was about not having closed the previous cycle from within. It was about carrying someone who is no longer there, but never really left. And this happens to more people than you might think. Smiling in photos, making plans saying they are happy, but waking up in the middle of the night with the wrong name in their head, with the feeling that everything is right and everything is askew at the same time. And nobody talks about this invisible presence that continues to mold reactions, silences, fears, about how you sabotage the new because you are still stuck in what was not concluded, about how everything seems right, but nothing is enough. And then the internal charge begins. It was supposed to be forgotten already. It was supposed to be fine. It was supposed to have moved on. But those who impose this, it was supposed to, never stop to listen to what the heart still whispers. Because the heart does not follow deadlines. It does not meet others' expectations. It just keeps feeling, even when no one understands. And that is tiring. It's exhausting to live between what was and what should be now. It's tiring to respond everything's fine when it's clearly not. It's tiring to sleep with someone and still miss someone else. And this kind of loneliness is the cruelest, because it happens even surrounded by people, even with new affection, new attention, new presence. It's the type of emptiness that isn't filled with presence, it's filled with truth. And the truth, when it arrives, tears you apart. Because it shows what you tried to avoid for so long. That maybe you let go of what made the most sense. Or worse, that maybe you were left by someone who felt more for you than they showed, and this doubt paralyzes. It makes life go in circles. It makes feelings not fit right anywhere. It makes everything seem like a substitution, never a reconstruction. No one tells what happens when you try to love again without having healed from the previous one. No one talks about the guilt, the silent comparison, the touch that reminds you of another, the kiss that doesn't trigger anything, the laughter that feels borrowed. And then comes frustration, because you want to be fine, you want to like, you want to dive in. But there is an invisible anchor pulling you back to the bottom of something you can't even name anymore. This is what people forget. Not every love ends. Some just go silent. And silence, when it becomes routine, seems like forgetfulness. But it is not. It's just love disguised as absence, waiting for the right moment to be faced or truly released. Maybe now someone already looks at you with admiration, maybe treats you with affection, maybe is everything you once begged to receive. But the body does not respond. The soul does not vibrate. The laughter comes out but does not fill. And it is not the fault of the one who arrived. It is the reflection of what was not finished, of what was poorly resolved and continues to haunt any attempt to start over. If there is no clean space inside, any new story becomes a repetition. It becomes a distraction. It becomes a frustrated attempt to prove to yourself that it's over. But it's not over. Not as long as the name still hurts, not as long as the songs are still avoided, not as long as there is a specific discomfort when remembering moments that should be healed. And you can even try to silence it. Say that it's an exaggeration, that it was just a phase, that no one is irreplaceable, but the body knows, the soul knows. And everything around starts giving signs. The places that were frequented together become unbearable. The dates become bothersome. Deep conversations seem shallow with anyone else. The true connection seems increasingly distant. It's not drama, it's living memory. Memory of a love that still beats, even if silently. Maybe time will still bring distance. Maybe the routine will slowly swallow this memory. But there is something that only direct confrontation with the truth can do. Liberate. Because ignoring the pain does not heal, changing companions does not solve, avoiding remembering does not conclude, only confronting transforms. Only admitting what still exists allows it to dissolve. And maybe that's the hardest step. Stop pretending. Stop running. Stop seeming okay, and allow yourself to feel, until the pain stops hurting, until the memory loses its strength. Until the name stops echoing in the dawn. Because freedom is not in forgetting, it is in no longer hurting when remembering. If this text has reached you, it is not by chance. It is because, at some level, there is still something in there that screams. Even if you have gotten used to silencing it, or then answer honestly, what is the name that you avoid hearing even today? Let it out. Not to create drama, but to create space. So that the new is not just different, it is real. And yes, there is still more. More than you thought you could feel. More than you'd like to admit. Because the more you try to bury what hurt, the deeper it spreads. And when it overflows, it doesn't warn you. It comes in small distractions, in causeless boredom, in the emptiness of achievements, in the rush to be happy without knowing why. And suddenly everything starts to lose its taste. Nothing fills, nothing vibrates. Nothing fits. And it's at this point that what no one sees comes. The mute comparison, silent. The one that is not confessed to anyone, but it is there rooted. Comparing looks, comparing touches, comparing silences, comparing the depth of one connection with the superficiality of current ones. And it hurts, because you realize it wasn't an exaggeration. It wasn't attachment. It was real. It was rare. And perhaps you'll only understand how true it was after you've lost it, after you've tried to replace it, after everything that comes afterward seems small, not because of the other person's fault, but due to the truth of what was lived before. You might be in a new relationship now, or trying to open up to someone, or even thinking you're healed, But if there's still a name you avoid, a birthday you try to forget, a conversation you never managed to delete, then you're not healed, you're distracted. And distracting oneself from the pain is not the same as healing it. And then comes the fear of being stuck in the past, of never feeling that way with anyone again, of having lived the peak and now only carrying the echo. But this fear doesn't come from love. It comes from the lack of closure. It comes from the gap between what was said and what was felt, because love that ends with clarity doesn't haunt. It only leaves longing. But the love that ends in silence, doubt, cowardice, that turns into a labyrinth. And you must have realized you've been walking in it for a long time, trying to get out, but always returning to the same point. The point where everything remained open. There are people who say if it didn't work out, it's because it wasn't meant to be. But those who truly lived it know. Not everything that didn't work out wasn't meant to be. Some things just weren't sustained. They just weren't understood. They just weren't protected as they should have been. And that also weighs heavy, because you feel there was more, that it didn't end because it was exhausted. It ended because someone gave up too soon. And carrying that perception destroys you bit by bit. Some people still remember the smell, the way they called your name, the sideways glance on normal days, the hug that silenced everything, the stay said with the eyes when the mouth said, go. And it's these things, these that have no photo, these that no one else saw, these that only you and that person knew, these are the ones that hurt the most. Because these are the ones that come back the most. And sometimes, even with all this, you don't want to go back, you don't want to repeat, you don't want to relive, but you also can't move on. You stay in this twisted place, between not wanting anymore and not being able to let go. And that's where the soul gets sick, because it needs space. But space only comes when there is release. And to release, you have to look, you have to feel, you have to admit, even if it hurts, even if it's late, even if the other person never comes back. What heals is not the return. It's the truth told to oneself, the truth that cleanses the guilt, that lifts the weight, that dissolves the illusion. You don't need to pretend anymore. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. You don't need to show that you got over it. You don't need to substitute love for performance. If you still feel, you feel. If it still weighs, it weighs. If it still bothers you, then it still exists. And only when that is truly accepted will something inside you start to change. If this touched you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Comment on what moved you the most. Leave a like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one.